Howdy guys, I'm back to do another book review. This time I'm going to be reviewing Delirium by Lauren Oliver. So the plot of Delirium is basically about a girl called Lena who is living in this sort of, futuristic world. Do they call it a dystopia? Where love is considered a disease and everybody gets cured or receives a treatment when they are about 16 years old so that they can't fall in love anymore and can't, succumb to the disease. So the story starts off by following a bunch of teenagers who are all building up to having the cure and follows their story. It's exploring their feelings towards it and how they react and generally, the effect that it has on them. But equally, it describes what's going on in their lives because they're not cured yet, so they can still fall in love, and obviously it's a young adult book, so that's probably going to be a big part of it. I thought there were a lot of positives about this book, really enjoyed reading it, and actually at the end could not put it down. It got to the point where I was obsessively reading, which doesn't happen too often, but I completely got taken away by the story and completely involved. One of the real strengths of the book I felt, which is similar to other young adult books I've found, or others where you follow a main character, is the way that you feel things with them. I felt that you really could imagine the conflicting emotions. You could feel what she was happy about, what she was, and how they were sort of fighting with each other, and you became a part of that. You felt it with her, and that was a real strength of the book. I suppose that initially when I started reading the book, I was expecting it to be a bit more simple and just a simple love story because it's a young adult book, and sometimes I can be a bit cynical about them. But actually, I found that it was more complicated than that. And although some bits were completely predictable because it's a young adult book, you know the sort of route it's going to take, I felt that the changes in the character were more gradual than I expected, which made it more complicated and also made it a lot more believable than a lot of love stories I've read. My favourite part of the book was probably about the last quarter. I felt that the story really picked up. It was really fast-paced, whereas the first half had been a lot slower and more gradual build-up. The ending was really fast-paced and got to the point where I couldn't put it down. I was reading it during the day when my children were around, which I never do because they drive me mad. But I just got to the point where I needed to finish it. I needed to know what happened, and that's fantastic with a book. I think if that should be the aim of books, to get you hooked to the point where you can't wait to find out what happens. Another good thing to me was the concept. I always harp on about concepts and how I love the notion in books, and dystopian things are often sort of appeal to me. But this wasn't just a good concept, it was a good concept that was extremely well explored and really well written. So as well as being a great idea, it was followed through really well as well. I'm not going to lie, at first when I started reading I did have some issues with the main character. I didn't find her likeable, didn't find a connection with her at all, but actually as the book went on I felt that was intentional, that she was supposed to be a bit alienated, and as she began to change and see things differently, I felt more of a connection, and I didn't even notice that my feelings towards her changed until the very, very end, where I found that I really wanted it all to come right for her. I wanted everything to be good. I was completely invested in her. And felt everything with her and had a really strong connection. To be honest, I find it difficult to think of any negatives about this book. There is one thing that particularly stands out to me, but that's more to do with my cynical nature than much else. I felt that the love thing was a bit overdone and a bit over the top. I'm not a big fan of love stories and romance anyway. I tend to be a bit of a realist when it comes to love. I don't want flowers and, sweeping off my feet. I just want playing on the Xbox and eating chocolate. So I think that taints my view of the book. But it was the only thing that did put me off. Then I suppose I should have expected it, and I did expect it. I knew that it was a young adult book. I knew that it was about love, so there was going to be a strong theme. It didn't put me off, it just felt a bit over the top at times, but then I suppose that's like what teenage love is. When I'd read the first part of the book, I'd probably read about 15-20%. I decided to just write down my first impressions of the book so that I could review that at the end. I thought I'd find that quite interesting. My first impressions were that I found it felt very young adult. It felt like every time boys were mentioned, it was like, ooh, boys, and it felt very teenagery. But actually, as the book went on, that did change, and I sort of, in retrospect, think that was very intentional. That actually, because of this world that they lived in, where love was treated differently, they did have a more strange relationship, and it was a bit, oh, boys are so different and weird. So I can see that actually that was intentional. I loved the way that the book was dropping clues. The author was dropping clues all the time about Lena's past. I liked that you weren't just told, clues were dropped and you pieced it together yourself. And actually, I don't think at any point you were told in sort of a long spiel everything that had happened to her. You just found it out gradually, and I think that helped you connect with her. I don't consider this to be a spoiler, so forgive me if it is, but as the book started and it introduced her, Lena, the main character, and Hannah, her best friend, and you sort of, you're under no illusions. You've read the blurb. You know what's going on. You know that there's going to be a conflict of emotions over the cure. And I found that I was completely excited because I wanted to know who was it going to be, who was going to rebel. Was it going to be Hannah? Was it going to be Lena? Was it going to be both of them? And that got me carrying on reading, which is great. So overall, I gave this book on Goodreads 4 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed it. It's the most enjoyable book I've read in quite a while. The only downside was the over-the-top love, which is just a personal preference of mine, that I'm not particularly into romance, and I suppose it's my own fault for reading a book that's all about love. Anybody who likes young adult fiction, I think, would really like this. If you're into things like The Hunger Games and Maze Runner, it's a similar thing. It's the dystopian future, how the world is different, exploring that, and I love those kinds of books. So I knew I would enjoy it, really. But equally, I think it's a really well written book. It's fast paced towards the end, particularly. It doesn't feel like you're just on a predictable story. It does feel interesting and like you want to know what's going to happen. It doesn't feel like it's a done deal. And I do intend to read the sequel, which is good. Which I didn't think I would, but I did. I do want to read the sequel. I've added it to my to read list on Goodreads. Yeah, I'm going to buy that soon, and I'll probably be doing a review of it in the not too distant future. So that's my feelings about Delirium by Lauren Oliver. I would love to know what you think, if you agree with things I've said, or indeed if you felt completely differently about the book. I love nothing more than chatting about books I've just read, and I have literally just finished this one 4 days ago. So not literally, that's a lie, but I did finish it 4 days ago, which is very recent, and it's the first review that I've done immediately on finishing a book, so it's the most up-to-date. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's another book that's similar you think I'd enjoy. Comment, I love it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.